Mirasee. You have to change your brain in the process so that you're enjoying it now. You're rewarding yourself now. I can do this. I'm building this sustainably. I'm experimenting. This is fun. You change your brain, then you know that when you get to the goal, it's going to feel as good as you think it will. Otherwise, it's going to be hugely disappointing when you realize your brain is still being like, this is not enough. I'm not enough. Today's episode is a treasure trove for every coach out there. We're going to tackle some common burning questions that might keep you up at night. How can you keep your energy high day after day, client after client? What's the real deal with biohacking, and can it actually transform your coaching practice and business life? I'm Melinda Cohan, and you're listening to Just Between Coaches. I run a business called the Coaches Console, and we're proud to have helped tens of thousands of coaches create profitable and thriving businesses. This is a podcast where we answer burning questions that newer coaches would love to ask a more experienced coach. If you're like me, adamant about the importance of self-care and always on the hunt for cutting-edge ways to fine-tune your well-being, then buckle up. We're going to talk about optimizing your health, not just for the sake of longevity, but as a catalyst for remarkable performance and success. Today, we're exploring biohacking. It's not just a buzzword, it is a pathway to breakthroughs. Tanessa Shears is joining me today for this conversation. She's a health consultant that supercharges entrepreneurs by doubling their energy and focus, boosting their business earnings, and she eliminates brain fog and ensures they wake up refreshed, maximizing productivity and maintaining high energy levels all day. She's the host of the Becoming Limitless Podcast and the author of the book Focus: Hack Your Sleep for More Productivity, Energy, and Growth in Your Business. Welcome, Tanessa.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. There's so much to dive into when it comes to optimizing our energy and how much it affects our business. I'm so excited for this.
I know this is probably my favorite topic of all the business stuff that I teach. This is like my secret weapon, and I'm so excited to dive in. But before we do, would you share a little bit of your background with our listeners?
My name is Tanessa Shears. I'm a mom of two. I've got an almost 2-year-old and a 4-year-old right now. And I've been in business 10 years in the same space, although it's looked a little different with the introduction of online business and everything. But what I do now is I work with entrepreneurs and I help them build a system for their health. Understanding data and metrics allows us to make good decisions in our business. It's not emotional decisions, it's based in fact. I love to help entrepreneurs create that same experience. And so I use wearable tech. Like I'm wearing a ring right now called an Aura ring that gives me so much information and how to guide us so that we're making sustainable health changes that make a difference to us. I mean, we all have full plates. We don't have all of this time to do 100 different health hacks. Like, I want to know what works for me. What are the habits that I can continue with that I know give me the most bang for my buck? And then I can guilt free let some of them go when I'm in a busy season. I think it's really about knowing how to best optimize your brain because your brain is the best asset that you have in your business. It's more important than your services, programs, newsletter, Instagram feed. It's your brain, right? And so my big thing is like, let's protect it because it is what is going to create these massive businesses for us that have impact.
I love that. Well, first of all, my husband has an Aura ring, one of the best birthday gifts I ever got him several years ago. Every morning, he's looking at all of the details. How did I sleep? How did that go? Where can I improve? Just like you said, it's that fine tuning. Where can I make some small adjustments that are going to lead to big outcomes? Let's start with a case where biohacking not only enhanced a coach's personal health, but also transformed their coaching style. So, what's a case where biohacking enhances the personal health and it transformed their business? Can you share yours or another client of yours?
Yeah, I have a client that pops right to mind. She was a CFO, but also worked as a money coach. When I started with her, a lot of brain fog, a lot of afternoon energy crashes, times in the day where she wasn't getting anything done. And then was always worried about having that brain fog when it came to client calls or her group program calls and being like, I just don't feel like my brain is present. I'm not coming up with ideas very quickly. And so one of the things we zoomed on with her specifically was her REM sleep. And I'm saying REM, REM, that's when you dream. It's really fascinating. This is why I call REM sleep entrepreneurial gold. Because get this, when we get good REM sleep, there's so many cool things that happen. There's four that I love. One is it makes you more creative. which I mean, all of us could use because that's what's coming up with our marketing and our sales. It helps you think outside of the box. If you're a coach, our job is how many different ways can I solve the same problem? Because not every client is going to receive the information the same way. And we've all been in that coaching situation where you're explaining something and you can see the client's face is like, it's not connecting. That to me is a signal I need to come up with another way to explain this, a better example, or a different solution. If my brain has adequate REM sleep, my ability to problem solve is increased. And then get this, I think this is the most interesting one for coaches, but adequate REM sleep has been shown in studies to allow us to read facial expressions and body gestures better. So when I'm coaching, I want to be present with my client and I want my subconscious brain to be firing on all cylinders, watching their face, watching their body language. If you notice they're not responding as much or they're leaning back, I want to be like, okay, this is an emotion I have to explore with this client. Where is this resistance coming from? And then the last thing that REM sleep does that I think is really cool is it allows us to maintain our emotional stability. So part of being coaching is being able to hold the space, coming from a place of not judging, coming from a place of not inserting your own opinion into things, and to be neutral. And so getting adequate REM sleep allows you to be in control of your emotional state. And I don't want to go into any type of coaching call, interview, anything like that angry, frustrated. We all woken up from a bad sleep and felt cranky, right? I want to be in control of my emotional state. So you put those things together, solution oriented, problem solving. I can read facial expressions and body gestures, and I'm in control of my emotions. Tell me that's not the recipe to be a super coach.
Mhm. And before we get too deep, like you've already given us some amazing insights, but I just realized that not all of our listeners, like I'm assuming that everybody knows what biohacking is. We talked about self-care in the intro, but let's back up for a second. Because if somebody's like, what are they talking about? What is biohacking first? Let's dive into that right out of the gate.
You know, if you Google anything, there's people doing like re-injecting their blood into their like skin and all kinds of things. But let's reel it back a second. Here's how I interpreted biohacking. I am the subject of my own experiment. I am looking at what can I do to my external environment. Think things like the darkness of your bedroom while you sleep, the temperature of your bedroom while you sleep. And I'm also trying to do experiments to the inside of my body. What happens when I get a really good sleep? What happens when I eat less processed food? The purpose of these experiments is to optimize me, subject of one, right? Some spheres of biohacking do lean into tech. Like we've already talked about the Aura Ring. There's the red light therapy, there's the red lens glasses, and you can find so much tech. But I'm really a fan of meeting yourself where you're at. And most of us don't need the tech to start. Most of us are just feeling foggy, tired. We'd like to have our energy be a little higher in the morning. And so I always like, okay, well, what can we do to enhance your energy, your focus, your clarity, your longevity? And that just comes back to looking at, okay, like what does science support? I'm going to try it with me. If I have some way of measuring the data like an Aura Ring, do I see the change? And if I don't, do I feel the change? Do I feel different from this health habit? And am I doing it because of me? Or am I doing it because my friend's doing it? I saw it on Instagram. A YouTuber said this was the right way to be healthy. And so it really comes back to that experiment of hacking your own biology or optimizing your own biology for your own benefit.
I love that. A lot of people will call it self-care. That's what I usually refer to it as. But it's so interesting. Whenever I talk about this topic, there is so much resistance. The most common is people are so programmed that it's a reward type of thing. They don't see it as a way to proactively optimize themselves. They're like, when I get this done or when I accomplish this milestone, then I will. And it's that whole win then scenario. And it's like, no, no, that's backwards thinking. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're all guilty of this. When this launch goes, when I get my first 10 clients, when I hit $100,000 a year, when I hire a VA, we've all been there and saying, then I'm going to have all this time and I'm going to go work on my health. But that never comes. I mean, we've all hit milestones. And then what do? We celebrate for 5 seconds and we're on to the next. So, what this ends up being is a perpetual cycle of, okay, I can only work on myself and care for myself when things are quiet. But the problem is, we finally maybe do get a week where it's a little more quiet. You're like, cool, I'm going to start exercising. Great. I'm going to go to bed on time. And you develop these habits and you're just getting them in place, but then life gets busy again. And you never actually learn how to be sustainable with your health during a busy season. So you end up in these cycles of on the wagon, off the wagon, and you spend so much time beating yourself up. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? You end up developing these beliefs about yourself. I've heard clients say, I've always been like this. This is normal for me. I'm someone who's not consistent. They have these I am identifiers of someone who can't stay with it. And then that's just how they enter new health habits now is like, well, I don't really think this is going to last, but we're going to try it again. Eventually, we just stop trying because the business can feel more rewarding. But I always like to really develop sustainability. And this is where I talk a lot about my experimenter's mindset. Instead of creating the perfect plan, getting the dopamine hit, starting on Monday, doing it, falling off, feeling terrible, that whole cycle, what if we just implemented one change at a time and actually got proficient at it, felt good about it, felt confident, and layered it on? Like, why are we in a rush all the time to get to this end goal? And it's usually only because we think that the end goal will feel better than it does now. But I'm a really big believer that our ability to control how we feel is as present now as it will be at that goal. And if we decide to go through this whole process of changing our health with our same brain that thinks, I'm not enough, this is not enough, and we get to the goal, you're still gonna think it's not enough. You have to change your brain in the process so that you're enjoying it now, you're rewarding yourself now. I can do this. I'm building this sustainably. I'm experimenting. This is fun. You change your brain, then you know that when you get to the goal, it's gonna feel as good as you think it will. Otherwise, it's gonna be hugely disappointing when you realize your brain is still being like, this is not enough. I'm not enough.
Yeah. I remember one of my early launches, it might have been the second one. We really understood the millions of pieces that were moving around during a launch. I remember going into it. This was also in the early days of me developing my self-care practice. It was pretty much there, but it still took diligent effort for me to hold those boundaries. I was talking with one of my tech support team members. I didn't even realize I was saying it, but I was saying something like, now that we're getting into the launch and things are busier, the days are longer, I'm not meditating as much. And just without missing a beat, he said, well, this is probably when you need to meditate twice as much. And I remember when he said it, and I just sat there for a good 15 seconds in silence. It's like, oh, yeah, that's right. That's how it works. And it really landed the importance of this whole approach to living, being, running a business, serving my clients. That moment clicked in to help me hold the boundaries. And it's like, this is non negotiable.
Yeah, you said that key word, it's boundaries, right? It's really understanding. And the reason I advocate boundaries so much is they act as a safeguard for our health. Because
Hmm.
think about it. Whenever we start slipping a little, we work a little later than we'd like to. We're checking the email at the dinner table. We've got Instagram scrolling while we're watching Netflix. All of these boundaries really start to get blurry. And we end up being so like, I need zone out time. I need more me time. I'm so exhausted because we haven't been giving ourselves what we need. That what's the first thing to go? It's your workout. It's eating. It's literally don't even eat lunch and then get really hungry, crave all this food, overeat at 4 o'clock. We end up in this cycle and then we overeat all night. That disrupts our sleep. We end up staying up late. The first thing to go is always health. So I think strong work hour boundaries, strong communication, like expectations with your clients, all of these type of boundaries, they're not for your business. They're for you and your health. Because like I said, your brain is that best asset.
Yeah.
We have to protect it, right?
Yep. Now, we've talked about boundaries, optimizing your health, and you've already begun to talk about some of the benefits when that happens. But what this takes is that you prioritize yourself. I have found that so many people, especially women, do not have any experience with this. They do not know how to do this. They were never taught it, especially in the world of coaching where we are nurturers, supporters, people of service. How do you talk to people about your health, your brain, all of that should be a top priority? How do you help them introduce themselves into their list of priorities?
Yeah, I think part of it is breaking this belief system that productivity is equal to worth, self-worth. Because sometimes that's what I'll hear is like, I didn't get everything done I needed to do, so I had to work until midnight. I had to work until 1 a.m. Or I'm laying in bed trying to fall asleep, but didn't get enough done today. I'm behind, never going to succeed in this business. And what that causes them to do is to continue overworking. And usually sleep is the first thing to go because it's like, it's fine. An hour is not a big deal. 2 hours, not a big deal. Breaking that relationship apart really looks like understanding that staying up 2 hours to work doesn't make you necessarily more productive. Those hours are never what we would want them to be. We're tired, but I always think you're actually stealing from tomorrow's productivity. And so if we are sacrificing sleep, sacrificing our health, we're just showing up behind the next day. And then I always ask, what if your brain was functioning 20 to 30% faster? Could you get your 6-hour workday done in 5 hours? Or if you're working 8 hours, what if you could get the same amount of work done in seven? What could you do with that hour? You have the option to get ahead on some new projects or maybe take on a new client. Could that be when you start your exercise program? Could that be when you get your me time so it doesn't take you until midnight to wind down because your day felt so heavy? How are we dealing with building our own resilience? So I think it's looking at that productivity self worth thing and asking, okay, when you say I'm not getting enough done, what is enough? Because that giant to-do list you're working off of or your Trello board with 400 projects on it, that is not an adequate way to judge your performance because you will never get to the end of that. Second is actually, have you specified what enough is for today? And third, is that reasonable? Like, have you left space in there for unexpected things? Your kid gets sick, you need to take the dog to a vet, a client showed up 20 minutes late and you had to run their session late, whatever it might be. Are you giving yourself parameters so you could adequately say, I did enough today or not? Because if we're just looking at the list and saying, I'm not getting enough done, it's always going to feel like that. So I think it's looking a lot about our conversation in our brain and what we're telling ourselves about getting stuff done and what that means about us as a human.
I love that. I feel like we should make to-do list notepads, and that should be printed at the top, those 3 questions. One of the favorite things that I love doing, I was guilty of having my to-do list 4 pages long and believing that I'll get half of it done today. Why that's even a thought in our head is beyond me. And when I learned the trick of I put all of my stuff on the right-hand side. I just dump it all out, irregardless of when it will happen, just that it needs to happen or that it's in my mind, so it's out of my head. And then here's the 3 things I'm gonna do before I put my head on the pillow tonight. Before I put my head on the pillow tonight, I will accomplish these 3 things, whatever it is. And what I quickly found was those 3 things didn't take me all day to do. When I had that amount of focus and removed the distraction or the stressors or the nagging of all the others, it freed up my energy, increased my creativity, better at problem solving, and so I was able to crank through those 3 things and then move 3 more things over and then 3 more things over, and that process with my to-do list helped me get a lot more done in way less time.
And you know what? I love what you said about I choose my 3 things. And I think we're probably coming from the place of being able to plan our time very well. But something interesting that I notice when someone is brand new to like, okay, I am doing way too much. I don't know how to organize my time. You know what they end up doing with the 3 things? I had this experience firsthand with a client and I was like, whoa, this is a cool teaching point. She's like, I have my 3 things and I'm not getting them done every day. And I'm like, okay, let's figure out why. And I'm like, what are your 3 things? And she told me A, B, C. And I'm like, "Okay, how long do you think one will take?" 90 minutes. How long do you think thing 2 will take? 60 minutes. And thing 3, 30 minutes. Okay, that's 3 hours. How long do you have to work on those tasks today? And she's like, an hour and a half.
Ah,
Okay. I love that. But I also think that now from that experience, I've seen, okay, we got to also make sure that if you're choosing 3 things, it's not like build out a lead magnet.
right.
Maybe it's like brainstorm the ideas for it. And I think being realistic with our time, and I think probably coming from a place of experience, that kind of thing is like, oh, yeah, of course I wouldn't overplan. But I think when we're new to it, it's like, oh my gosh, my 3 things are getting done. Well, looking at like, how long does that take? How long do you have? Do those things match? And for her, that was an unlock. And a lot of guilt got let go of in that moment of like, oh, it's not something wrong with me.
Yeah, yeah. I love this because the enthusiasm, especially when we're new at this, the excitement, the thrill of it is so present that we're just like, whoosh, and we want to be all in it. That enthusiasm can get the best of us if we're not careful. So I love the balance with the biohacks and taking care of our brain to balance that out so we don't get overly eager. And that's why I love that 3rd question that you asked. Is that reasonable? It gives us that check that says, "Oh, wait a minute, I only have an hour and a half, so let me break this down."
Yeah, I've even been putting something called a sliding block in my day. I've got 3 of them, 1-hour sliding blocks during the week, and they are blocks of time that because I like to time block, but I also find that I like to leave empty hours in my time block. When I teach this, I get a lot of clients bristling and being like, "That's an hour I won't be productive during the day." I said, "No, It's an hour when you get a proposal that comes in or a client and you want to take on a consultation last minute. It's an hour that you have now available where you are not getting behind. I planned for that. And if you get to the end of the week and you have 3 extra hours, I'm sure you could pull off projects from next week and get started on those. But I just love this idea of leaving intentional space because it always gets filled. I don't want to put myself in a situation where I reach the end of my week and my brain has the opportunity to tell me I'm behind because it's going to try anyways. I don't wanna give it any extra evidence.
Yeah, we don't need to help it along. And with all of this, it's important that we don't do this alone when we're first starting out in self-care and biohacks, because when we get in that rut of, well, you talked about that belief system earlier, that productivity, that's where the value is, that's where our worth is. If we're not careful and keep spiraling down that direction, we're getting into the land of addiction. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, "Oh, I'm addicted to productivity. I'm addicted to overworking or working too hard." But I believe that we have to break that addiction quality before we can put these in place. I don't think it's something we can do alone. I think it's something that we have to do with a guide, a mentor, a coach, colleagues, confidants. We have to enroll our family into supporting us. I think it takes a village to do this.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of having people that are either outside of our story or they've been through it before and know what's coming up ahead of you. And this is one thing I love with clients. I always let them know when I start with them, I'm here to coach you hard, and that's what you're here for. You are here to be stretched. I am here to support the dream that you said you wanted, not what your emotional brain in the moment says is the truth. And so I love that, just being able to be like, "Hey, did you notice this? Did you notice you just said this? You stated it just like this is a fact, but that's actually entirely optional." Or like our brains don't know how to quite problem solve for things when our schedule is so full. There's no time to meditate during a launch. Our brains spit these things out and you don't even notice them until you had that colleague of yours be like, "Did you just hear that?"
Yeah,
I think
right.
that's the power of coaching, right? And
Yep.
we all know that. And I think that's why having community, mentorship, friends, whatever it is to support us is huge.
So let's get into some of the different biohacks. What biohack has the most impact on mental resilience? Like a lot of times, coaches, we're dealing with clients that are in challenging situations. We're facing high pressure situations. What's a biohack that has the most impact on our mental resilience?
And it's going to be hands down sleep. We can go into the hacks on sleep specifically, but many brains will rally against this. But exercise and sleep, like those are the sexy things. Like when we talk about fitness or health, where does our brain go? What are you eating? Are you going for your walks? Are you exercising? But I love sleep. I think it gives you the most bang for your buck. If you're not getting enough sleep, you end up with fatigue, brain fog, and energy crashes. If you wake up irritable, what are the chances you're going to do your workout that day? If you're not getting enough sleep, our body's insulin, that's a hormone that actually affects our blood sugar that has a lot to do with energy and brain fog. That hormone does not do its job. It's actually 20 to 40% less effective. So by not having adequate sleep, it's like we're trying to roll a boulder uphill on everything else with our health. Then, not to mention the fact sleep is free and you're doing it anyways. So, why not start there? And I think there's that misconception my sleep is fine. I get it. I get 7 hours. It's fine. And I'm going to tell you this I worked personally, intimately, one on one with over 100 entrepreneurs. Like, I'm talking at the 6 and 7 figure level, people who my sleep's fine. And I put an aura ring on them and I get their data. The average entrepreneur sleeps about 6 hours and 20 minutes a night. And they also spend about an hour, I would say about an hour 15 to an hour and a half awake every night. This is time falling asleep. This is waking up. This is wake up middle of night. This is tossing and turning. I don't think we adequately get what it takes to have a good sleep. Just because you went to bed at 11, you counted forward 7 hours and you woke up at 6, that does not mean you're getting 7 hours of sleep. Statistically, you're probably getting about 5:45 or 6. And we wonder, like, we're like, what is wrong? Like, it's so tired all the time. And so, I mean, gosh, if you're talking about bang for buck and biohacks, we should go into sleep because that's where most of our progress is to be made.
Yeah, the bookend of our sleep was a game changer for me when I set a morning ritual
Mhm,
instead of just jumping up, getting ready, go.
mhm.
Right now, my morning ritual is 3 hours.
Hmm.
And before I ever even come in to do any sort of work, there is a good 3 hours so that not only when I wake up, but I can maintain that quality of sleep through all that I do in that 3 hour ritual in the morning. It didn't start out as 3 hours, but I began to really understand just how impactful sleep and the boundaries around my sleep, going to bed and how that works, waking up and what that's like. People always ask me, Melinda, you run circles around people, yet you're never exhausted. You don't burn out. Like what's going on? And this is part of it right here. So I agree with you. Sleep is a great place to start.
Yeah, for sure. You want to dig into some of the specific biohacks on sleep?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's go through a couple of things that I think if you were to change right now would have the biggest impact on your sleep. And given some of these are a privilege if you have small kids, keep in mind I've got an almost 2 and 4 year old. So I am in the midst of young kids and I get it. I score regularly around a 95 on my sleep score on my Aura Ring Nightly, which is very high, a 95%. And I've got small kids. Even if you're ever woken up at night, you can still get really good sleep. So these hacks will definitely help with this quality of the sleep you are getting. Number 1, I would say consistency of timing. And this is not just one of those superficial habits that you hear on the internet about, oh, yeah, go to bed at the same time. No, there's actually a reason. You have a body clock called your circadian rhythm. And this rhythm is responsible for your alertness levels during the day, your fatigue during the day, when certain hormones are released, when certain hormones are stopped. This runs so much in the body from your heart rate, your blood pressure, your stress levels. When we go to bed and wake up within a 1 hour window on each end, consistently, it optimizes this rhythm so that our brain has adequate time to consistently recover during the night. Now, when we're doing this, like go to bed 3 hours late on the weekend and then earlier on the weekdays, and we're waking up at 5, 7:30, and 9, we're essentially giving our body the experience of jet lag. Now, what this can look like is increased resting heart rate, increase in breathing rate, and stress levels. Your body is under constant stress as if you traveled time zones. It is the same experience as jet lag. Every hour that you shift this rhythm by on the weekend, it can take up to 24 hours to recover full cognitive capacity. You stay up 3 hours, that's why it's now taking you to Wednesday to get your groove every week. And we repeat this cycle of throwing our whole body's clock off every single weekend. So, number 1, hands down, rhythm. Is your rhythm really consistent? Do you find that makes a difference when you stay up late or throw it off? You kinda just feel like you're not with it as much the next day?
Yeah, for sure. But what I love about this is the nuance. Like with my husband, I'd said he has the Aura Ring. There's been a number of times it was like, why is my resting heart rate so high? And we look at all the normal indicators and it's like, didn't do that, didn't do that. That's in check. But why is my resting heart rate so high? So I've starred this, circled it, put hearts by it, and I cannot wait to text him this. It's like, dude, we need to look at how much we're adjusting when we go to sleep and when we wake up. I have a feeling when we look at that, we're going to find that it's more than within an hour difference. I can't wait to tell him.
Yeah. But sometimes people are like, "I don't even feel rested when I wake up in the morning." Well, here's something really cool. We hear the hormone cortisol, and what do we think? Stress, don't want it, right? But if your cortisol did not rise in the morning, you would feel terrible all day. There is a pulse of cortisol that goes off. And do you know what dictates what time that cortisol pulse goes off? Your circadian rhythm. If you are sleeping through that cortisol pulse because it's a weekend, that's why you feel groggy. If you wake up too early and you are way before that pulse, you are going to feel groggy. You want to be waking up with that cortisol pulse. And what sets that is your consistency. So,
Mhm.
this I find is the difference between biohacking and health on the internet. Is biohacking is like, okay, this is my body, how my body functions, and understanding the why behind it, not just like as a, we've all heard, go to bed at the same time. But why?
Right.
It's giving you the experience of jet lag. That's why your brain is so foggy and you're tired all the time. You can't get out of bed in the morning. Everything feels like a drag. That gets the buy-in for me, right?
Yeah, that right there, the why gets the buy-in. I find that when I understand the why, I commit to it. If it's just like, "Oh, that's good to know," there's no commitment. It's like, "Okay, I understand this is important and I'll do it." But when I understand the why, that's when the commitment happens. I love that you pulled that out. Okay, this is so good. What's another one?
This is the second biggest impact. It's if you can stop eating at least 3 hours before bed. When you eat, your heart rate goes up and your blood pressure goes up. This delays how long it takes your heart rate to fall to its lowest while you sleep. Why is this important? Your body gets the most recovery after your heart rate bottoms out. Let's say you go to bed at 10 and it takes until midnight for your heart rate to drop. Every minute you spend sleeping after that is super sleep. You're really recharging and restoring. Now, if you go to bed at 10 and you decided to have a bowl of popcorn at 9, your body needs to digest that. and your heart rate goes up and your blood pressure goes up. And what happens is if you were to look at a graph, and you might see this on your husband's actually Aura ring, if you look at a sleeping, resting heart rate right after you eat too close to bed, instead of watching your heart rate drop as you go to sleep, you will see it climb.
Mm-hmm.
And that is all of that extra time you are not spending recovering. Instead, your body is focusing on digesting. So many of us eat an hour before bed, it's snacks, a glass of whatever. If you move it back half an hour at a time, I honestly find the sweet spot for me is about 3 to 4 hours before bed. Now, this obviously is going to have a lot to do with your family schedule, work, and clients. However, this is something I would highly recommend experimenting with because of how impactful it is. And in that same breath, like if you think about how that food stresses out our body, exercise is the same way. You're wanting to do things that actually wind you down before bed, but food is a huge impact.
Yeah. And I love that word. You've used it many times, experimenting. Get curious with this, right? That's for all of our listeners out there listening to this. Be curious, be in research mode. Take that approach of curiosity. It's like, well, what is working for me? And don't just take the blanket approach, but really get curious and experiment for yourself. Okay, what else?
Okay. Another huge one is light. Light is one of the most potent sources of information for our brain. So, right now, it is a beautiful sunny day in Vancouver. And when you go outside, the sun is overhead, it's blue and white light. That overhead bright blue and white light goes through our eyes and up to a little center here called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN. And it tells our brain that is daytime. Don't produce any sleepy hormone melatonin. Keep cortisol high, keep alertness high. But what ends up happening is now we go into the hour, the 2 hours before bed, and what do? We look at our iPads, we look at our computers, we look at our TVs. What color is that light? Blue and white. And it's literally telling our brain it's the middle of the day, stay alert. And that blue and white light from our screens has actually been shown in research studies to have what's called a 3-day digital hangover. The quality of your sleep is affected from this bright light exposure before bed up to 3 days post exposure. Do you know what the worst part is? It messes up REM sleep. Do you remember right at the beginning we talked about REM sleep, the one that makes you a super coach? That is what takes the hit. And so it's such a normal habit for us. But what I love is like start making small movements of the amount of space between sleep and screens. And there's a couple fun little things you can do as well. Like if you have to be on your screens, so be it. Some of us have kids and that's working time. So here are some things you can do. If you think right now, what is it like when the sun sets? The sun gets low, the light gets dim, and it gets reds and oranges. We want to recreate an indoor sunset because this is what cues our brain to start winding down, to start producing that sleepy hormone melatonin. And so I like to create an indoor sunset in my house every night. And so what I do is I turn off all overhead lights. I then dim lights. So I choose dim table lamps as opposed to like those bright fluorescent overhead, especially in the bathroom lights. Those are really bad ones for our sleep. And then I also like to start changing the colors of my bulbs. In one of my bedside tables, I have a red bulb. And then the other one, I have a white. I use the white one in the morning and I use the red one at night. So when we're reading or when we're hanging out or I'm talking to my husband, the room is like a nice orangey red hue.
Now, I'm quite sure we could keep going way down this rabbit hole of sleep, but let me ask you this. What are some other biohacks when we think about coaches, they're in their business, managing a multitude of tasks? What are some other biohacks that are effective?
Yeah, I love the concept of how our blood sugar plays into our health. When we eat food, specifically carbohydrates, it enters our bloodstream and we get a rise in blood sugar. It is the fall in blood sugar that can often be associated with that drop in energy, that lack of clarity, those afternoon energy crashes we get. What ends up happening throughout the day is the foods that we are eating are causing a constant up, down to the blood sugar. And that high blood sugar creates inflammation, which can cause brain fog, energy fluctuations, and a whole host of other health problems. And so when I'm looking at my plate, here's a really simple one. I've never been able to forget it after I heard it. When I look at my plate, the question I like to ask myself is, did the things on my plate come from the ground at one point or have a mother? And that's how you can tell it's a whole food. If you're looking at a piece of bread, it doesn't qualify. If you're looking at an egg or a vegetable, it does. So it's a nice little easy way because whole food sources are going to affect your body much differently than processed sources. Eating a sweet potato, vegetables, salmon, and maybe even rice is different than eating pizza, bread, and sugar, right? And so what I start looking at is, how can I process my diet to keep my blood sugar stable? The simplest way, like just look at breakfast. How can we clean up the first meal of the day? How can we make it so that our breakfasts are supporting us? And a really good one that I like right now, we make it 4 days at a time. So we only cook breakfast twice a week. It's a sweet potato hash, sweet potatoes, ham, scrambled eggs, and a zucchini. You can add half an avocado in there. We had a handful of mixed nuts. Okay, it's got your carbs in there because we're not afraid of carbs. Carbs are good things. What are your carbs coming from? It's where's your source of protein, where your source of fat. Where we go wrong is bagels, sweet yogurt, cereal. We cause ourselves to go into a blood sugar spike first thing in the morning, and we wonder why we feel so groggy, hungry 3 hours later. My brain doesn't work properly. By stabilizing that blood sugar with whole foods, it's amazing what that does for our resilience.
Yeah. So let's summarize some of the things that we've talked about today. We got into what is biohacking, and I love your description of it. It's just ways to optimize me, being in the experiment of optimizing me. And then I loved how you framed it up, because I am the systems gal. Build a system for your health. The best ways to optimize your brain, some REM sleep biohacks. We talked about what is biohacking and self-care and how it's not a reward. It's not a win-then approach. That's backwards thinking. And you said it many times, to develop the experimenter's mindset. I love when you talked about how we have to break the belief system that productivity is where our worth is. When we're disregarding and working into hours in the night, you're stealing from tomorrow's productivity. We got into some awesome sleep biohacks. Thank you for taking us deep into some of those nuances, which helped us uncover the why. When we can understand the why, that's where the buy-in happens, and that's where commitment happens. And then we got into some fun other discussions about that. Tanessa, any parting words?
Oh, that encouragement that you can do this if you start slow. Don't feel like you have to jump in, both feet, do all the things at once. What if it was just one experiment at a time?
Beautiful. Thank you for listening to this episode of Just Between Coaches, and a giant thank you to Tanessa Shears for this fantastic conversation. You can find out more about her at TanessaShears.com. That's Tanessa, Tanessa, Shears, SHEARS.com. And in the show notes, you'll find links to her website, Instagram, YouTube channel, her book, another amazing resource that you can download, The 12 Ways to Biohack Your Energy. I'm Melinda Cohan, and you've been listening to Just Between Coaches. Tanessa, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Just Between Coaches is part of the Mirasee FM podcast network, which also includes such shows as Making It and Once Upon a Business. To catch the great episodes on Just Between Coaches, please follow us on Mirasee FM's YouTube channel or your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a comment or a star review. It is the best way to help us get these ideas to more people. Thank you, and see you next time.